Welcome to the Greatness Garage Podcast, the place where small businesses get big answers. I'm your host, Brad Borkus, founder of Epitome Coaching and Consulting, and this is the Greatness Garage. Welcome everyone back to the Greatness Garage. We're so happy to have you. Today we have Bill Putsis here to really share with us the insights of an academic mind. This guy is brilliant. You're going to absolutely love it. Bill, introduce yourself to the garage.
Thanks, Brad. Pleasure to be here. I'm Bill Putsis. I've been doing what have done in academia for most of my career. I'm doing the reverse these days of what most people do in academia, and that is I'm going from academia to industry. I've gone from writing business books to fiction. So everything I'm doing these days turn things on its head. I'm an economist by training. I got my PhD from Cornell. I was on the Cornell economics faculty for a while, and then eventually transitioned to the Yale School of Management. I've taught anywhere from the London Business School to most recently UNC Chapel Hill, where I just recently went to emeritus status, as well as University of Sydney. I teach occasionally on executive programs in Duke, and also teach quite frequently on executive programs at the Yale School of Management. I also now have left all of that except for the things that I do with Yale, and have joined the leadership team of Knapp Capital Management, an innovative, now no longer a startup because we're running like gangbusters these days, commercial real estate company. I've written 2 books on strategy in addition to all the academic work that I've done. And I've now written with a co-author, Dave Adelheit, a third book. And the third book is actually a work of fiction set in business that we draw conclusions on our website. So it's meant to be a fun read, and then you go
Very
and think
cool.
about the business conclusions later. So I've taken a lot throughout of my career on the academic side to get to where I am today. And Brad, I know we talked briefly before that you 90-second introduction for an academic is not possible. So I'm sure I went over on that one.
No, you're perfectly and so tell us then too. So the book, is it available now? Where can we get the book?
It's available everywhere on Amazon, Walmart, barnesandnoble.com, in paperback, Kindle, ebook.
And what's it called?
It's called Scarlet's Revenge.
Ooh, cool. That sounds interesting. I like it. All right. We'll start with good stuff already. So let's jump right into it. So share us the story of you wish you would have.
Well, it's funny. I thought about that. In Brad, you're great as a host preparing your guests for what's upcoming, and I thought a lot about that question. For most of my career, there's very little things I would say that I wish I would have. I'll tell you one quick early story. The only thing literally comes to mind, and I always say to people, if I had to be one other person at what used to be Anthony Bourdain until the tragedy of his death,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would be a shortstop or a center fielder for the New York Yankees. So when I was in high school, I had ambitions and got some good early recruiting as a catcher. And I always wish I wish I knew what would have happened if I decided to go the professional baseball route. Instead, what I
Oh,
did
yeah.
is I went to university and went and got my PhD. Other than that, one of the things I prided myself is never have regrets. So
Mm-hmm.
when the opportunity came up to go back to industry and to write another book, I never said no. So other
Yeah.
than that, most of what I've done has been I take chances. And so
Yeah.
I would say to anyone out there listening, don't leave everything on the table. Put everything on the table. Don't leave regrets.
Well, I love what you so it's interesting too. Like it's sometimes the older we get, the more risk adverse we become. And
Yeah.
but it's funny as you're kind of really you experience that and you're realizing that that risk that you decided not to take, kind of go the route, the academic, the more maybe societally structured route. You would love to have known. Wish you would have seen maybe if that could have gone a little farther, if that would have been a potential for you, huh?
It's interesting, Brett. I have an article today. I'm a contributing editor and on the board of a publication called CEO World. It's a pretty good online publication.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I wrote an article, came out late last night. It's on there now, and it's about disrupting yourself. I think
Mm.
the issue, Brad, in many ways, is when you disrupt yourself and you do something different, especially later in life. And I just had a LinkedIn post on this. What it makes you feel is vulnerable. It makes you
True.
feel
Yep.
exposed. right? You
Yep.
do something different. We're in a comfort zone. It's ironic because in many ways we want to grow, right? What we're pushed
Hmm.
in life is to grow and expand. But when do you really grow? You grow when you're out of your comfort zone. And
Yeah.
we have a career developing a comfort zone. And so, how do we get out of that comfort zone, grow in a way that really transforms who we are? But when you do that, you feel like, what? Go back to the what if question. What if I
Yeah.
didn't do this? Am I an idiot?
Yeah.
What if we, like we said, we wrote this Scarlet's Revenge, the book of fiction, and it's set in business. It's like The Goal, which was something that was done and did very well in operations many years ago. And we wrote it, and I'll tell you, it was released yesterday. I'll tell you in a month or so if I was an idiot or people really like it. Everyone who read it early loved it. But
So
they're a friend and family, right?
yeah. So when we're looking at this, at change later in life, or really, there's this chasm of fear, right? That we
Mm.
sit there and like you said, the fear of what if we make the wrong decision? What if we don't do the thing that we, what if,
Yeah.
and it's too bad, right? Because we do that and we create this false reality. And there's so many times that our mind is so quick to create the negative, dangerous sides because of our brain's role to keep us safe, but it stops us from taking that leap. So what have you found then in breaking that chasm? What is the things that in that disruption that have really kind of shown some fruit?
So I think a couple of things. One, as I've done the transition, this article is really about the two transitions that I've done, going from academia to industry. Most people do it the other way around.
Yeah.
And the other is going from writing traditional business books to something non-traditional. As I look at what we've done in App Capital Management, and we've put up $15 billion worth of development projects in just a little
Wow.
over a year. So
Wow.
the success you have as an organization, and being part of the leadership team that brings that to fruition, is incredibly fulfilling. So that's the success part, right? We could have easily not succeeded, in which case my answer would have been very different. On the
Yeah.
book side, going from a nonfiction traditional business book writer and career writing, I've had over 30 scholarly, peer-reviewed scholarly journal articles, and there's a very traditional path when you write a work of fiction. Create characters, write about how they interweave and interact. And much of what you do, right? I think good writers talk about writing about their own experiences, and much of the book is true, things that really happened. I
Hmm.
write a one story where a person who was panhandling on the streets of DC had come up to someone and was looking to ask them to buy dinner at the dollar store. And literally, the characters went in and bought, bread and
Hmm.
various, cold cuts and the like. And that actually really happened. And so
Wow.
much of what you do when you write that work, it exposes you because these are stuff that happened to you. You're really exposing what
Yep.
you
Yep.
are.
You pull on that reality to
Yeah.
create that fiction.
Yeah.
So when you see, like, when you look back at that, the baseball, what do you think pulled you from that direction? Let's just say it the way of following your heart
Yeah.
versus following the mind. What do you feel was your was the pulling factor that pulled you away from that?
Yeah, great question. So it goes back to the fear. It's a really insightful question because I think it was the fear of not doing it. So where would I be if the only thing I was able to do is reach and that's successful, of course, in and of itself, you would get to that level, but only get to a triple A level.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so I'm 30 years old, I have no college degree and don't make a lot of money in the minor leagues. What do I do then?
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
that fear, in many ways, of not succeeding that led me to the path that I'm on now, which probably at the time was the right decision.
Yeah.
The principal behind what we're doing at Knapp Capital, Fred Knapp, had some time with the Pistons. He didn't do that. He just went
Hmm.
for it. So I
Yeah.
always wonder what
Yeah.
happened if we choose a different path.
Well, and you know what that reminds me of too, so I was a college football player, and you hear this a lot in athletics is sometimes we are burdened with the opportunity of choice.
Yeah.
Like there are those who, like you said, have no choice. Either they make that or they've got nothing. Like, and like it shows up in that way that it really doubles down the commitment of they're going to make it work because they have to make it work. And it's interesting that yeah, perhaps yeah, we're in that unfortunate space that we get the beauty of opportunity to choose different paths, huh? Yeah.
Great point. I have a good friend, and he was the ex-CEO of Underwriters Laboratories, a guy by the name of Keith Williams. And he used to say he wanted, when he was running the company, he wanted his people to have a hamburger problem. And what he meant by that is, if you're fighting for your next meal as a startup, you don't
Hmm.
know if you're going to be able to buy dinner because you don't have the funds to do it as a company. You work your tail off and you're
Yep.
single-minded in your focus. And so he wanted his people, he felt they were maybe sometimes too complacent. So how do you find
Interesting.
that hamburger problem for your people?
Yeah, interesting too. And how do you align people so that their hamburger problem matches your hamburger problem, right? Like that the
Great point.
same way that because it's
Yeah.
interesting too that as a especially as a founder and a an owner, a lot of times everything we have is in this. So it's
Yeah.
almost easily because every palpable thing we look around, every reminder we have, everything we do, a lot of times everything, the way we're defining ourselves right now is inside that business.
Oh,
So
I
that
agree.
hyper focus is a little more accessible for us. Yeah.
It's also a double-edged sword in many ways, right? So when you have that hyper
Hmm.
focus and everything is on the line, it kind of tests you who you are as a person, right? Do I throw everything under and everyone on the bus to achieve? I had a startup years ago that didn't succeed. It was, I thought, a really good idea. An organization called Bridge. It was started in the middle of the pandemic to help struggling small businesses. And I had one person on the team say, "I will sell my soul to the devil." In order to make this work. And my reaction was, you don't sell out. That's
Yeah.
if you sell out, then you're built on a house of cards. And so you
Yep.
have to have that same integrity, that same belief, the same attitude towards everyone from the start through the end.
What a great lesson there, right? Like when if you sell out, if you sell your soul to the devil to make it, you'll have made it with no soul. And
Yeah.
that's the people that get to that age, whether it's 40, 50, 60, and go, this is it.
Yeah.
Oh, and that regret is, oh, I can only imagine at that space when you don't take that pause to connect with your family and try to, we all struggle with balance. Like it's we all we want to chase it and we want to chase all the things that we see are beautiful, but if you don't take that time to at least look around for that balance, at one point you're gonna look around and not be able to chase it, not be able to do anything
Agreed.
about it. Yeah, yeah.
Agreed.
So,
And it doesn't feel the same if you do it, if it's based on something that wasn't right to begin with. So how do you
exactly.
maintain that throughout? I saw a post by someone I know on LinkedIn who thought it was good. And she said, balance is overrated. Strive for joy. What gives you joy?
Mm.
Sometimes
Yep,
it's work.
yep,
Sometimes it's your
yep,
children,
yep.
right?
Well, and it's interesting too. I think that's the thing too, where I always explain to people that balance, or to say balance, is a journey, and it's like it's that constant seeking of joy. Because here's the thing: do you have joy in your work or joy in your family? Well,
Yeah.
yes, right. And so it's about that constant movement and that ability to find that space that says, okay, this feels good, and this can feel good right now, and then it'll feel imbalanced, and then you got to kind of move again, and all that stuff that shows up. So
Yeah, yeah,
very
but it's
cool.
funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that because the hardest part for me, and I don't know everyone else there, I would say balance is the eternal quest. Life is the eternal quest for balance, something you never quite achieve. How do
Mm.
you, something I haven't succeeded at, how do you be comfortable? How do you be happy in those unbalanced periods, knowing with confidence you'll eventually get back to balance rather than be unhappy because you're imbalanced?
Yeah, finding a joy in the journey. I
Yeah.
really I love what you're saying. Yeah, that joy in the journey, the ability to do that and just say, "Oh, this is part of the work that I'm doing for the greater good." That's a great point. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So,
So, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say the other thing I wanted before we got on, I wanted to mention, I was believing serendipity. There's certain things in life that take a path that there is no. So I still remember the thing, one of the questions you asked me early on, before we got on live was I started to think about like there was a period where I worked for GM early in my career, and I was on with my advisor, my PhD advisor from Cornell. And I was about to hang up the phone because I was unhappy in industry with GM. And right before, back when phones had cords on the wall,
Yeah. Yeah.
I told my son that. He said, "Dad, you are old." But I was about to hang up, and on a whim, I just happened to pick the phone before I hit the receiver and said, "Hey, Keith, you know have any academic positions that are open? I'm thinking about coming back." And just then he said, "Yeah, well, actually, we have a position. You'd be perfect for it."
Ah.
So if he had hung up. a half a second more quickly. If I hadn't made that connection, I literally no idea where I'd be right now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be talking. Your listeners wouldn't be listening. Everyone has those one or more serendipitous moments in their lives. That's what, in many ways, what defines us, and how do you go with it rather than resist?
Well said. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. What a cool thing. So I love it. So that yeah, wish you would have like I said you would love to chase that. What would have happened? And so now the question, I love this part of the segment. This next segment is you aren't gonna believe this.
Yeah.
So share with us, tell us like what is it this story? What is the thing that we're not gonna believe this story?
So I think I may have spoiler alert, given it away already. The one thing I would say you won't believe is how hard it is when you write a fiction book that's a business
Oh,
book.
yeah.
And it's not
Yeah.
very exciting, I know, when you wouldn't believe it, but we recently launched Scarlet's Revenge. And it's Scarlet's Revenge colon outsmart, outlast, a business strategy for a disruptive world is the full title.
Yeah.
But when you write a book that's Scarlet's Revenge, and you're not in the market yet, and you Google Scarlet's Revenge, you go to Amazon and Scarlet's Revenge, and you get the apostrophe, you end up with every romance novel, everything you don't as a business writer want to be associated with.
Yep, yep.
And so we're trying really hard to get up the chart so that way we come up first rather than Scarlet's Revenge, written about part two of some high school thing that was having problems with their parents, written in 2014. Probably a great book, but not a business book.
Yep, yep.
So that was something we never anticipated. And
Yeah.
we're trying to make light of it, but it was like, who thought of this title? Well, yeah, that would be me.
Yeah, and then it's you look at the challenge is in how does it position it in the minds of not only the way that we have our own perspectives and we see this is how we see the name will land, and then somebody else has it, and it's funny as people do market testing and they look at the things and going yeah but like I think it was is it Yugo, right, that down in Spanish means no go, right, or
Yeah, yeah,
something like
yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's like going
yeah,
like
yeah,
the marketing testing and trying to understand it, how it is, and trying to find the right one that resonates. And there's a saying that says that which repels attracts. And so the
yeah,
question
right.
is sometimes you might have something that pushes people off, but maybe at the same time it pulls in the right people that you were looking for. And so
Yeah, love it.
that
Yeah,
weighing that balance when you don't know, right?
yeah. Really well said. But so many humorous stories like that we've had out there, and we've all experienced them. How do you turn it around then? I think is the test, right? So for us, how do we take this as an opportunity to use it in a way? And what we're trying to think of is ways to start, and we start on Monday, on
Yep.
social, kind of making light of this. And so how do you, in many ways, for people, especially in business in general, the defining moments happen not when things are going well, but when they're not going well. How do you make sure you stay true to yourself when they're not going well? How do you make sure you stay the course? How do you notch it up in a way that makes you successful? How do you persevere? And the difficult part, I would argue, Brad, is we all know the book, The Alchemist, and there's many points in the book. The way I tell people is like literally. I have determined if I am determined to do something, I'll do it. If there's a brick wall and I can't break through it, I will bang my head against it until my head is bloody to get the other
Yep.
side. Only thing I didn't do is step back and realize that brick wall is only 6 feet wide and I could have just walked around on the other side. I don't realize that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yep. Yep. And it's interesting too, that perspective and to know I love that you share that because that's something that we all kind of go through. Like to realize that there is that perspective and that people always ask me what's the most difficult thing in coaching and advising.
Yeah,
And the most difficult thing is to remind people to pick up the phone and ask for the help.
yeah,
And a
great
lot of
point.
times they're like, "Oh, this. How was your last, week, or how your last couple of weeks?" And they're like, "Oh, it was miserable. It's been we doing da da da." And I said, and we talked for 5 minutes, and he go, "Oh, so much better. Thanks for that perspective. I feel so much better about it." I go, you could have had this 7 to 10
Yeah.
days ago if you would have called, right? And it's interesting that the fear or that I shouldn't bother them or whatever to reach out creates that chasm of your own problems. Yeah.
Great point. It's funny because I think successful people, most if not all successful people, are like this. Is you believe you can do anything. You believe you can make it happen. So when I was we call it KCM, Nat Capital, I had to wrap up my academic career, so there was a year in between, and I felt I could do a full-time job at academia. I could wind down the consulting practice. I can still teach at Yale, and I can run an organization that's growing, and that was foolhardy because no one, no matter how good you are, can do all of that. And
Yeah.
so learning from that is for some people easier than others. For me, it's like I always think I can do everything, and unfortunately, I learn better
Yeah,
as
you
I
learn.
try to do everything.
So let me ask this question then. When, because one of the things with like you're not going to believe this. Like one of the things that you said here I struggle believing is, the commercial real estate market in the last, let's just say when COVID hit and also got really, really tumultuous and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And you guys put $15 billion into the market this year. What is some of the sauce that makes that, like, that's crazy to me, like going, and because I down here in Houston, right, and we see people repurposing and restructuring and re-IDing and trying to get commercial to be viable commercial, and yet I see commercial popping up and I see it too, and so it's like, okay, what are we seeing?
great question. And sort of this is a pivot story. So we started out, the strategy was to buy existing assets, existing buildings, and make them better, and then eventually flip. I kind of so one person said the strategy was expensive flipping houses, right? Just really big houses.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Um, and the strategy was exactly to do what you suggested, that the time to invest is a time when everyone else isn't. Famous Warren Buffett
Hmm.
quote to that point. You want to
Yep.
invest in the downturn when commercial real estate, usually a 5-year maturity, buildings are coming up for sale at distress. That's when you want to buy.
Yep.
And we found that based, pretty much exclusively, or primarily at least, on the skills of our founder, who was the executive director and built Hudson Yards from the ground up.
Oh,
The market
wow.
was telling us that what they wanted was Fred's development abilities. And so the 15 billion I quoted before are development projects. They're still
Interesting.
ground.
Yep.
But putting a shovel in the ground, the building from the bottom up is something based on his ability, and we as a team hopefully bring to the table, is in demand in the marketplace. And so we pivoted from what was our goal, that brick wall, if you will. Maybe I've learned with
Yep.
age that now I can step back and walk around. And the walking around
Yep.
analogy in this case was to build on Fred's reputation in the market, his ability to build in Hudson Yards, the largest private development project in the history of North America. And we have
Yep.
one project that will be, I think, close to number two in what we're doing.
Wow.
And so the market told us that what we were doing, to your point about investing in the downturn in commercial real estate, wasn't what we wanted, that we being the market. And so we now have adjusted significantly to do that. And we're primarily now doing developing. We will eventually go back to a blend.
Very cool. Yeah, that's so interesting that, yeah, where is it at? Because it's interesting as I, down here, and just kind of observationally, as I'm looking out and I see some of the home developments down here in Houston, as Houston continues to get farther and farther, like, it's Houston right now, if you drive, is about 65 miles across.
Yeah.
When you drive from, metro to metro, and it's really interesting. I see them continuing to go farther and farther and farther out. And then you hear in the downtown where they're going all this square footage of unused office space, and it's interesting too to see how that market happens. What do you think is going to be like when people reinvest back into these office buildings and spaces where something's got to be? I mean, they got to come to a price point where somebody says,
Yeah.
"Well, if you're going to give it to me, I'll take it," type of thing.
Yeah.
What do you
No.
think they're going to be used for in the future?
So I think a couple things. One, if you look at commercial real estate, all commercial real estate isn't created equally. I wrote an article in CEO World a little while ago. So trophy assets, really high profile ones, really good Class A buildings still are doing reasonably well. It's
Yep,
lower
yep.
grade buildings in their cities, like you said, that are not. Conversions are expensive, and that's part of the problem is when you
Mm.
convert office to multifamily buildings. But I think we're going to see much more of that. I think we'll see some buildings that have to be razed to the ground and
Wow.
start
Yep,
over. And that probably in many markets is most economical. We have a housing shortage in this country.
yep, yep,
And you're
yep,
building out in part because it's cheaper to build, especially when it comes to apartments, 501s or 502s, they're called. So you pretty build sticks and put together a bunch of Legos, basically.
yep, yep.
And that's cheaper than it is in many cases to convert an existing asset and existing building. And so I think as we move forward, we'll see if you think of what the quality is of those inner cities shrink in some sense, you'll
Mm.
see the expanding, as you mentioned now, continue. So look at a city like New York. Manhattan isn't going anywhere anytime soon, right? You look at a city
Right.
like San Francisco, it's 7 miles by 7 miles. That's not changing anytime soon.
Yep.
But the
Yep.
sprawl that we're going to see, and I don't mean sprawl necessarily in a bad way, there's some really
Hmm.
good planned communities that are just thinking about things carefully with. And the other things I'll say really quickly, Brett, that comes to mind is when Hudson Yards was built, it created a void in Midtown. So where do you get the tenants for the largest project, 12, I think 12 million square feet? Where do
Wow.
you bring everyone? Well, they come from Midtown. They come from New Jersey. What do you do with the old
Hmm.
buildings? And that
Yeah.
was before COVID. Add COVID on top of it, right? So I think we'll continue to see it, but what we've always taken the approach when we start to think about investing is we don't want to invest in the lower quality buildings. We want to think about cash flow positive,
Yep.
A grade listings that may be in distress just because of
Yep.
the interest rate cycle and the like. So, yeah, it's interesting as you see the cities move further and further out, that blend will change. Um, Brad, one final note, there was great video I thought was really interesting is on YouTube. I think it's like 7, 8 minutes long. Why all of America is starting to look the same. And
Okay.
I actually teach this in some of my classes over the years. And the idea is that because it's cheaper to build the traditional building multifamily from house to house to house to house, than it is to be innovative. But now we're starting to see the need to be carbon neutral, working with this organization that has building
Ah.
panels that are carbon negative, that are, you need to think about fire resistance and things like that. How do you change what is easy and cheap? Well, it's going to be, well, maybe there's not as much pressure on the housing side and from a demand, though, rather on an environmental side or a building bill, a fire friendly, for example.
Yep.
I didn't
Very
quite I
cool.
probably answered your question in three more, Brad, but that's
No,
the
that's
coming me
awesome
out.
because it. Well, and that's it. Well, you were always interested, like what's next? What's that's our jobs as business owners is to see what's around the corner. So
Yeah.
awesome. So the final segment, I love. I really love this one because of the way there's so many, I think, lessons that have come out of this, and then just listening to people talk about it. But what is some of the aligned, intentional language that helps you, stay true to your core, to find your purpose, to move forward, to create that strategy, whether it's quotes or it's mantras or it's just words to live by. What is your aligned language?
I'm smiling and laughing a little bit because I can tell you what probably about 80% of my students who, and hopefully some of them listen to this will say, and because I say it over and over and over again, I do believe it's true, whether it be in teaching an academic class, whether you're running a business, whether you're whatever job you have, it's have fun with it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't, some people are, and God bless them, there's some people who just don't have a choice, like you said
Hmm.
before, and are doing
Hmm.
something they don't enjoy because they're making ends meet for their family because
Pure
they're
survival.
trying to put their
Yeah.
kids to college or whatever it may be. But whatever you do, be the best at what you do, whatever it is, and have fun with it. That's what I've always said. And the second thing I've said, and this is maybe the advantage of coming to different career paths later in life. And that is I try and be a tree trunk,
Hmm.
meaning I have my values, I have my principles, I have things that I stand for. And that has to be literally, you're not going to move that trunk. I don't care who you
Yeah.
are, how much money you throw at me. I don't care what it is. I'm that trunk. The branches and the leaves may sway a little bit, but if you're rooted to that trunk, they're not going to stray too far. And that's that true north. And so to listen is what's your trunk? What is the thing that you won't move for? And
Wow.
just be
Yeah.
true to that. That's the way I think about it.
You know, it, I love it because that's really solid. It is, and you look at that like in the process that I teach called the alignment method. In that center core, if you don't define, and I think that's the thing too, is everyone's awareness to define what is that trunk. What are those things that are near and dear to you, and then how do you like you were even saying the first part of it, how do you integrate fun into that, right?
Yeah,
How do you
yeah,
integrate, the experience of making this something you enjoy to do? How
yeah,
do you integrate that into that process and into that core element of who you are and what's in? Yeah, it reminds me. I think it's Jefferson that said, in matters of opinion, go with the flow. In matters of
yeah.
principle, stand like a rock.
I
And
love that.
it speaks
Yeah,
so much of that as well, right? That understand what's important to you and really be solid on that. Yeah.
so true. And the tough part is that, I think I've come to that later in life. It's, I keep saying later in life. I'm not as old as I make myself out to be, I think. But I've come true to that later in life. What I admire are people able to do it early on innately. And I look at my son who's 28, I think he has it in his core. And so if you have it at 28, that's great.
Yep.
And when you're younger and you're trying to make yourself, you make your career, you're willing to give up more of your principal in many cases. And the hope is that you're able to get there without having to do that. Or when you
Yep.
make those choices, and sometimes we all have those defining choices, you don't. It's easier now for someone like me than it is, say, my son or someone else who's in the 20s.
Well, let's transcend that one because I agree with you 100%. What is that how what would you tell to somebody who's younger, who's coming into that space where they're getting a bunch of options and they're getting pulled in different ways? What is some exercise? What are some processes? How do they root that tree? How do they find that tree trunk?
You think so? So this, again, this is easy advice for someone who didn't find it till later in life, but at first you have to know what it is, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
you can't have that trunk not move. And the other so to the Jefferson quote, which is a great quote, by the way, you have to know those what are those things for which you wouldn't move, right? There's certain things
Hmm.
you. I was like it. There's a New York famous thing in ethics, the New York Times test. And it's if you do something in business and it's on
Oh
the front
yes,
page of
yes.
the New York Times, would you be okay with it? Would you be
Yep.
okay with your family and your parents or whoever, your loved ones reading it? And that's probably a good guide. If you're in
Yep.
business early on, and what happens behind closed doors that no one sees, if
Yep.
that comes to light in the New York Times, these days almost everything is, you're an AI and phone calls and
Yes. Yep.
would you be okay with that? That's probably a good guide. And, unfortunately, some of us are privileged to have upbringing that teaches values, other we have to learn it in life a bit philosophical, I know, but I think knowing what it is and knowing which ones you'd bend for, and know what, you don't want to go to be that next. There's members lived in Australia years ago, and they're the walking trees, literally trees that move.
Mm,
Uh,
yes. Yep. Yep.
so be careful. You don't want to be one of those, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just I'm choosing to be over here right now. Yeah,
I'm a tree trunk, but it moves, right? You can't.
that's true. So yeah, and I think you're right. It's do the work to make yourself aware,
Yeah.
right? Like I hear that. It just in really being aware of asking yourself the questions and doing the self work, doing the deep work of just asking, hey, what is it that I need to really be anchored to? What are my principles? And I think even a simple question like that, it's interesting when I go to a lot of conferences, I'll say, all right, who here has values? Everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
Yeah. Yeah.
here says, that they can list their top seven values? And those hands go down mighty fast.
Yeah.
And it's that we know the generality of it. We know what's important, but to cut out and carve out that time to say, hey, to ask those specific reflective questions. What do I want? What are my values? How do I expect to get there? Yeah.
Yeah, and Brad, to build on that, so the thing is, what do you want to be stubborn for, and what do you want to be
Yeah.
flexible
Great.
for,
Oh, I like that
right?
one. Yeah.
Because there are things I'm stubborn, and people interact
Hmm.
with me may not like it because I won't change those values. I just
Yeah.
won't have. And so, how do you find what you're going to be stubborn for? How do you find what you're going to be flexible for?
I like that. Even that is too, and and being honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there's something that is important to you that might not be socially the norm, be okay if you really want that. If that's really something, be willing to be stubborn for that. I like that one.
And,
I
and,
get,
and
and so now I can just tell my wife I'm just living out my values when I'm stubborn.
I love that. I love that. That's great. I have to remember that. That's good. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm enjoying this conversation, Brad. It brings out some interesting points. I think about the New York Times test, and I never thought about this before, but I might ask, what's the reverse? What would you be proud of if it was in the front page of
Yeah.
the New York Times?
Yeah.
And that's probably a good thing to ask
Great.
yourself too.
That intention, I like that too. Yeah, because that intentionality of go
Yeah,
do that, right?
yeah,
And you look at it too when there's those things where people come to, wow, that's great that you said that because there's these things of volunteer and and rhythms and whether it's faith and all these things that you would love to be on, to be known, proud to be on the front of the New York Times and your obituary, right?
yeah,
And to say,
yeah, yeah.
and do them now, right? And that's good. Make that part of your priority list. Yeah, yeah.
What's harder too is we get caught up in the day to day, right?
Yep. We get part of the demands that we think we're supposed to do versus the things that really resonate with us. And like you
Yeah.
said, make it fun and really know what your tree trunk is. So,
We we
oh,
we ran a program for a number of years, and I have a colleague who wrote a couple books on Jeff Lesher on paradoxes in business. And we centered it around submarines. So submarines, in some ways, are a paradox. They're the only ship meant to sink, right?
oh, right.
Um, and everything was centered around leadership in the submarine. Because in the submarine, if you don't, you have to trust your shipmates so much so because if you go to sleep and they don't perform, you could die.
Right,
Like
right. Yep.
high functioning, high performing teams are there. But what he often talks about paradoxes in business. How do you manage the inbox and plan for the future? How do you choose the things you do daily so that gets you the long run? And he argues it's like two sides of a coin.
Yep.
It's not one or the other. They're actually both there. But
Yep.
how do you
Yep.
do it in a way that what you do in the short run gives you a better opportunity of succeeding in the long run? And those are those intentional choices we do at work. If we
Absolutely.
think about it in and rather than or terms, we're often have a better job at succeeding. And that's kind of what he writes in his book.
Yeah. How do you filter and discern? Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. We
yeah,
talk because, in the alignment through the lens of the values. Right. And so if you're not using, and it's so funny that you say that because it spells out for enemies. So if you're not using that a lens, and I profess the lens of the values. And if you're not using that lens, you don't know what you're supposed to respond to or not. How do you, narrow that down and discern what is their priorities? How do you define your priorities if
yeah.
you don't know what's important to you? Yeah. Hmm.
Well, and Brad, the other thing I'll say is I think most of us know it. We don't even sometimes we don't know we know it because there are many things I know, and maybe this is, after some experience you learn this, but it doesn't feel right in your gut.
Yeah.
And I think everyone knows that, but sometimes we don't listen to that, right?
Well, and not only that too, this is where being brave and having courage
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
when you did it and you have the feeling, stop, go back,
Yeah.
change it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well
So.
said. Well said. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Bill, this was an amazing interview. I really appreciate the depth and just all the intellect that you brought into this and just shared with us to look at it from different ways. And so I just want to remind everybody the new book is out. It's called Scarlet's Letter.
Scarlet's Revenge.
Scarlet's Revenge. Scarlet's
And,
Revenge, right? And
and just
it's
remember,
not a romance book.
it's not the romance one.
Oh, so I'm very excited. I think everybody go check it out. Bill, thank you so much for your time today. And Greatness Garages, thank you again for your time and attention. We love it. We hope you got something out of it. And if you ever need something, always feel free to reach out. Thank you all
Brad,
and have
absolute
yourself an
pleasure.
amazing. Say again, Bill.
Absolute pleasure.
Hey, my pleasure too, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Remember, action is what makes this information all worth it. If you need help figuring out what that action is, go to callwithbrad.com and we'll get some clarity and help you figure out what that should be.